Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hope you're having an amazing day. We've got a lot of stuff to get through regarding RTX 50 later on, as it comes on the heels actually of some very interesting rumours that we've of course covered concerning RDNA 4 and the cancellation of N41 and 42. But I want to kick this video off with Intel's Arrow Lake. As many of you know, it will be the 15th generation processors and will launch for the desktop and will essentially be Intel's answer for Zen 5. It will also be a hybrid design featuring for the big cores, Lion Cove, and the Skymont cores will pull the duty of the small cores. But there is a very interesting rumour concerning the cache on L2, and that is that the big cores, so again that will be Lion Cove, will have the L2 cache increased to 3 megabytes, which is actually quite a chunk. By the way, Golden Pig upgrade. They posted on bilibili.com. However, I want to give courtesy credit to 9550pro on Twitter, which is where I initially saw this reported. Now, honestly, at this point, I personally think Zen 5 is probably going to be more performant, but it's very difficult to know 100%, because obviously not only are we dealing with rumours, incomplete ones might I add, but we're also talking about engineering samples, and I haven't exactly been given full benchmarks across tons of different applications. Now, I did recently leak some Cinebench R23 numbers for Zen 5, but obviously that still, even if those numbers are accurate, and I believe they are, even if they are accurate, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the kind of performance that Zen 5 offers across every single application. And even if it is, it still doesn't really tell us exactly how Intel will face off against Zen 5. Zen 5, to my understanding, is going to focus a lot on single thread performance. The rumor is that Arrow Lake for the Lion Cove cores, it will no longer feature hyperthreading. And of course, we did discuss this quite in depth recently. I will be very interested to see how all of this just ends up, to be honest with you. I think that Zen 5 is going to be a price increase. This is not a leak, this is just a guess. I think that it's going to be a very interesting comparison. It's also going to be curious, to be honest, to see how AMD markets these things. At that point, obviously the AM5 platform will be a lot more established. It'll also be very interesting to see what happens in terms of users and whether they feel the need to upgrade. You know, I've had this talk just actually with a number of viewers as well as friends, and it's like, let's just hypothetically say you have like a 9900K or like an equivalent AMD system like a 3700X or something a little bit, you know, faster or whatever. Yeah, sure, you may not have the highest minimum frame rates in many games, but I don't know, like Spider-Man, Cyberpunk, whatever, like, it's going to be okay. It's really down to the GPU. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how many people upgrade, because obviously CPUs for the AM4 platform like the 5800X3D obviously are just selling extremely well at the moment. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, especially on the used market. With that said, let's move on to Nvidia. And this, of course, does come on the heels of some very interesting RDNA 4 news. So if you haven't been paying attention to RDNA 4, the rumor was initially that it would be multiple compute dies. I reported it as well as several others. Basically, there would be essentially multiple compute dies stacked on a base die, and that base die in turn would connect to MCDs. But then the rumor from myself, again, as well as others, was that this was no longer the case. Instead, they were going to go more along the lines of, well, N31, essentially. A single GCD, which was going to be bigger. It was going to be lower performance, but it was still going to be pretty decent. Probably somewhere, and obviously, again, we're talking about guesses here because the products were not released. But from my sources, they were saying it was probably going to be just about the 5080, maybe a little bit slower. However, the original design, which was multiple compute dies, was probably going to be more closer to the 5080 Ti or something like that. That's just to give you an example. Again, the performance numbers are quite difficult to pin down because we are talking about unreleased products from both companies. However, now this no longer seems to be the case. Kepler L2 on Twitter was reporting that N41 and 42 were both canned. I actually was hearing the same thing a couple of days prior to Kepler stating it, but I was so skeptical it was actually true. I was honestly just kind of reaching out to people. Since then, I've heard from multiple other folks, a couple who are very well known in the industry, and they've all basically told me the same thing. Yeah, N41 and 42 seem to be dead. The exact reason is not 100% clear at the moment. I've heard multiple things, including the fact that the higher end variants need more time in the oven, and it would affect timelines for RDNA 5, blah blah blah. It doesn't really matter, however, for the sake of this video. The bottom line is RDNA 5 allegedly will be the multiple compute dies, but at this point, honestly, I'm not 100% confident in AMD achieving that. I would love to be wrong. Anywho, it seems that AMD are not the only company that have been changing things, as there are some very interesting rumours considering Nvidia. Concerning Nvidia. So a Chip Hell forum post was initially made by someone called Panzerlight, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, and this was subsequently backed up by Coppertite 7 Kimmy. Now, as far as I understand it, the timeline basically went that this post was initially posted by Panzerlight, who was then made public by videocards.com, and then Coppertite basically came out and said, yeah, this is what I've been hearing. Now, how it seems to be right now is that GB200 series, so 202, 203, 205, 6, as well as 7, are going to be for the gaming GPUs. Now, I have to tell you guys, this is quite different to what I'd been hearing, although obviously my news is, well, older. A source actually reached out to me and told me that the plans had basically changed. Now, I do not know whether AMD are the cause, in other words, RDNA 4's N41 and 42 being canned, or whether it's something else. Basically, to my understanding, GB202, for example, is going to be smaller than the initially planned 102. If I had to take a guess, I think that there's a lot of reasons behind this, not least of which is just basically to do with die size and capacity, and Nvidia basically making so much damn money from the AI market, which basically means that they are just making so much cash that I wouldn't say gamers are a lower priority or anything, but they certainly are not as high a priority as perhaps they were when Nvidia were literally just printing money. I mean, seriously, look at the amount of high-end GPUs that these companies are buying, and look at the prices that those folks are paying, and it doesn't really take a genius to think, hey, you know what? Yeah, there's obviously a priority, shift here from Nvidia. And it's not necessarily that gamers are going to get totally screwed. It is, however, to say that I think both AMD and Nvidia, and perhaps even Intel, if they can, really push their GPUs, there's going to be a lot of changes in the market. And the thing is with these rumors, obviously, plans change all of the time. If you guys remember back when I was trying to remember the code name of RTX 40 for a second, when the specifications for Lovelace were leaking, there were a lot of changes. And I'd been hearing some very interesting things with the 100 series GPUs. Like, a source actually told me that 103 for the gaming seems to have been cancelled, and now more recently a source is telling me that yes, this information for the GB200 does seem to be right, although I'm not quite sure how old this information is, and again, it's very difficult to know. I will be super interested when all of these GPUs do launch. The rumor is, of course, that they are going to launch in 2025, whereas the earlier launch date was going to be 2024 late. There's also another thing to remember as well, and that is with AMD, at the moment, the MI GPUs, those are essentially using a variant of Vega, CDNA. Now, obviously, there have been a plethora of upgrades and performance enhancements, but basically speaking, that's what they're doing. Meanwhile, I think it's from MI 400. I can't remember if it's 4. I think it's 400. It's going to basically switch to a variant of CDNA. To a variant of RDNA. I think it begins with like RDNA 3, albeit with a number of changes to push towards compute performance. So yeah, I will be very interested to see how all of this ends up. The performance obviously is going to be really what gamers want. The other question for many is like, what is going to be the pricing of these things? I don't think it's going to be cheap. And obviously that's a big problem as well for PC gaming, because GPU prices are just absolutely absurd. And if, for example, Nvidia chuck an extra, I don't know, couple of $100, $300-$400 or whatever on the RTX 5090, like, how much are we actually willing to pay for these high-end cards? Like, it's kind of getting a bit nuts, to be honest. That's one of the reasons I'm not particularly too upset that Intel, with Battle Mage, allegedly are going to be pushing towards like the RTX 4080-ish level of performance. It's all going to come down to pricing at the end of the day. I will also be very interested if Sony does, like myself and Tom Henderson and a couple of others have been reporting, actually finally launch the PS5 Pro, because honestly, nothing's certain at this point. I will be very interested to see how many folks just say to PC gaming and just kind of give it a rest and just jump on the Pro. Even if it's like 2 times more performant than the base model console. Well, anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one, guys. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.